What's up, everyone? Welcome to This Week in Racing. I am David Land, and I should apologize for the slowdown in content the last couple of days. As I'm sure many of you are aware, I flew out to California to drive an F1600 car prepared by Charles Ante and to get my SCCA novice racing license, which I was able to accomplish. And you'll be able to see much more footage of that within the next week. So that's very exciting, and I guess the first thing to announce on This Week in Racing is that I'm on the free agent market, so to speak, in terms of race car driving, and that's very exciting. But we also need to talk about the rest of This Week in Racing, and unfortunately, in going on the plane, I got a little bit sick. You might be able to tell from my voice, but I'm feeling a little bit better now, and we've got a lot to catch up on. Stuff that I missed while I was in California, and stuff that has just been continuing to happen throughout this week. I mean, it's everything. It's Formula One, it's IndyCar, it's IMSA, it's NASCAR. In fact, there's so much stuff that some of this stuff I'm not even going to be able to talk about. I mean, just before I started this video and I already had the script ready to go, news broke that American Rallycross is shutting down, and there's a rumor out of Germany that Roger Penske might be buying the Mercedes F1 team. Stuff like that I can't even put in here. So, especially stuff like that Roger Penske rumor, you know, if that breaks, we're going to be talking about that. But let's talk about the stuff that's a little more solid right now, and we start by talking about WEC and hypercars. That's always a lot of fun. So Peugeot has confirmed that they will field a factory WEC hypercar program in the year 2022. Now, this is a welcome addition for longtime sports car fans. Of course, Peugeot was such a force in the late 2000s and early 2010s, of course, as well. Their dominant victories at Le Mans in 92 and 93 with the beautiful Peugeot 905 resonate very much with sports car fans, and of course a French brand heading back to the most famous French race of them all gets a lot of people excited. Now, the question with this move is whether or not it will affect a potential DPI and hypercar convergence that looked like before this was announced might be imminent. What is the status of that? We're going to have to look and see, but boy, oh boy, it will be an awfully big missed opportunity if DPI and hypercar aren't racing together in 2021. There will be big changes in IMSA going into the 2020 season, and one of the changes will happen mid-season, as Yost Racing and Mazda will part ways after Sebring this year in 2020. That's reported by Sportscar 365. They also are reporting that Nelson Cosgrove will be replacing John Doonan. Cosgrove was formerly one of the heads at the Toyota Racing Development Program. So this is going to be something that we're going to have to watch very closely going forward. What will happen with the Mazda program? Will it continue in DPI? Will it be a customer program rather than a factory program going forward? Lots of moving parts there. Keeping with IMSA, Jordan Taylor has been confirmed to be taking the seat vacated by Jan Magnussen at Corvette Racing, and that leads us into what's happening with his father's team, Wayne Taylor Racing, of course, the Cadillac DPI, and they announced their driver lineup for 2020. Renger van de Zande and Ryan Briscoe will take the driving duties full-time. Scott Dixon will come on for the rest of the North American Endurance Cup races, and then Kamui Kobayashi will return once again for the Rolex 24. You might as well hand him the Rolex trophy right now. This is an incredibly strong driver lineup, and it's going to be a lot of fun to see Scott Dixon back in a prototype. I think the first time he's been in a prototype since the Daytona prototype days with Chip Ganassi before they got the Ford GTs. And the last time Dixon was in a Le Mans style prototype, I think, was the Acura ARX way back in like 2009. So this is going to be a lot of fun. This is a story that broke last week, but it's nonetheless very important to talk about. Meyer Shank Racing will partner up with Andretti Autosport next year, essentially taking over that kind of association with Andretti Technologies that was so successful with Harding Steinbrenner Racing and Colton Herta last year, and will go full-time in the series with their current driver, Jack Harvey. certainly this is huge news, because anytime anybody can get their hands on Andretti dampers, which are of course one of the few open components that are open for development in IndyCar racing, it affects their performance so much. And if you think about Jack Harvey as a driver, Jack Harvey is a guy who, he really outshone the Schmidt-Peterson drivers last year, and he was on a partial schedule while they were full-time drivers. So this is a very exciting partnership, and it's going to be fun to see the career of Jack Harvey progress. Racer.com is reporting that Spencer Pigot is out at Ed Carpenter Racing. This is a bit of a disappointment for many, including, I think, the most, Spencer Pigot, who I think assumed was going to come back for a third season with Ed Carpenter Racing, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Now, there is a pretty important report out of the Netherlands. It broke, I think, yesterday or maybe 2 days ago, that Ed Carpenter Racing is looking at signing Rinus VeeKay, the runner-up in last year's Indy Lights Championship. Now, here's the deal. Rinus VeeKay denied this on social media, or at least said nothing has been signed yet. But seeing as Pigot is now officially out at Ed Carpenter Racing, you've got to think that Rinus VeeKay is first in line for that full-time seat over at that team. But things are not done moving and shaking at Ed Carpenter Racing. There's a distinct possibility right now that Nico Hulkenberg, that's right, the current Renault Formula One driver who will be out at the end of the season from that team, will be taking Ed Jones's seat at Ed Carpenter Racing in the number 20 car on the road and street circuits. Now, everybody's going to point out that this German driver said, hey, I'm not going to do the oval tracks, and this seems like the perfect opportunity for him. Now, the question I would have still, despite his talking about not doing the ovals, how adamant is he going to be if he gets an opportunity at the Indy 500, especially with the new Aeroscreen safety device? I think you're going to see a lot of drivers who were, previously a little bit skittish towards ovals, maybe changing their tune a little bit with the added cockpit protection. But if Nico Hulkenberg shows up at St. Pete next year, that's a big boon for the IndyCar series. Heading over to NASCAR, Daniel Hemrick, who we've talked about the last couple of weeks, will not be in the Cup Series next year full-time. He will drive for Junior Motorsports and Xfinity. But I have to say, looking at the available seats in the Cup Series and the available seats in Xfinity, I think this is the best seat for him. It's certainly one where he'll be able to allow his talent to shine, probably more so than he would if he was able to stay at Richard Childress Racing for another year on the Cup side of things. So I think Daniel Hemrick, right off the bat, I think you're looking at him in the Xfinity Series as the immediate favorite to take the championship over there. And finally, wrapping up our lengthy news segment with silly season stuff out the wazoo, Daniel Suarez has lost his ride to Cole Custer. This was something that has been reported on, talked about, speculated upon for nearly pretty much ever since Daniel Suarez took this seat over at Stewart-Haas Racing on the Cup side. And now it's official. Cole Custer will drive that car for next year, and Daniel Suarez is out on his butt right now, and it's going to be tough for him to find anywhere near a decent ride this late in the season on the Cup Series or in the Cup Series going forward, and we're just going to have to see where it all shakes out for Daniel. So now I want to do something a little bit different that I've never done before on this channel, and specifically for This Week in Racing. But I figure it's appropriate since last night I got to see Ford versus Ferrari starring Matt Damon and Christian Bale to give you a review of the movie. Now, I'm going to keep it spoiler-free, but obviously my fan base generally is pretty well informed, so you probably know how the story ends. The question really, as a racing fan, when you're watching this movie is how well does it play out on the big screen? Well, the first couple things I need to tell you are that the performances of Bale and Damon are second to none. In fact, as Carroll Shelby, I think Matt Damon probably is going to get an Oscar nomination, and if he doesn't, he's gotten screwed, because I think his portrayal as Carroll Shelby is unbelievably well done. It's so close to the Carroll Shelby you see in the interviews, especially of that time period. It's very surprising as well to me, because I remember when he was cast in that role, I thought Matt Damon is Carroll Shelby. I was very skeptical on that point, but he won me over. It was awesome. Christian Bale as Ken Miles, just fantastic. Very, very good. Even though he hasn't quite got the same accent Ken Miles has. I mean, so few people actually, know what Ken Miles sounds like to begin with. Doesn't really matter. The content is there. The character is there. And that's really, I think, the key. And he does a fantastic job. The big issue with this movie, and I'm going to sound like a boomer, sorry, but it's the historical accuracy. The racing scenes, if you're going into this movie expecting the second coming of Steve McQueen's Le Mans, you're going to be in for a big time letdown. I'll just say that. I don't want to spoil too much, but I will say that, you've seen the Daytona scene in the trailer, you've seen the shot at Auto Club Speedway, and it's just as obvious as that is in the trailers. And I would have to say that the Daytona scene is probably the worst part of the movie, in my opinion. It's just not very well done. It deviates way far from history, and it's kind of cheesy. And it almost, this is going to sound weird, but it almost overshadows what happens later at Le Mans, because what they do with Daytona is they really amp it up, and it kind of hurts the movie, in my opinion. There are some things like the basic Hollywood tropes of racing movies, unfortunately, where it's like they've been driving down the Mulsanne Straight at Le Mans for 20 seconds, and then suddenly it's like, well, I can just keep pushing the throttle pedal down and shift up a gear, and I've found 20 miles an hour. So you're gonna have to kind of put some of the logic back in your brain if you're watching some of the racing scenes, because otherwise you're gonna want to pull your hair out. There's some other detail-oriented things that are a little bit head-scratching. In fact, at one point in one scene, you can see a model of a Lola T70 race car on the shelf, and that car wasn't built in 1966. It didn't exist, so why was there a model kit on a shelf? Who knows? And I guess this isn't a major spoiler because it's in the trailers, but this was one that really rubbed me the wrong way, is that Enzo Ferrari is at the racetrack, and if you know anything about Enzo Ferrari, he didn't show up to races. He was kind of a behind-the-scenes schemer, and so it was weird to see a movie with Enzo Ferrari in it where they kind of just missed a huge detail of his character. Now, I really want to be clear here. I'm not dissuading you from going to see this movie. In fact, I think it is definitely not driven. In fact, I think it's probably better than Days of Thunder. But I don't think you can really put it up into that real, true upper echelon that I think is Grand Prix, Le Mans, and Rush. It's probably closer to Rush because it has a lot of that modern sensibility, the modern filmmaking, the feeling of the characters of Shelby and Miles are really awesome. And it's really awesome to see those two characters play everything out. It's just, detail-wise, I think it misses the mark by a pretty long. I mean, it's an Adam Vinatieri field goal. I hate to break it to you, a modern Adam Vinatieri field goal where, sometimes it's right down the middle at 50 yards and it's great. It's great to watch. But other times, especially when it seems to really count, it's wide to the right when it you think this is an easy 30-yard field goal. How did you miss that? Just like when there's a point where a Ford Mark IV comes onto the screen and it looks nothing like a Ford Mark IV. It's like, that's a 30-yard field goal you should hit, but you missed it wide to the left. How? And this is supposed to be the movie that's about Ford and Ferrari at Le Mans 1966. But again, I think it's worth going to see, making up your own mind. That's just one man's opinion on that. So, thank you guys so much for watching This Week in Racing. I will hopefully have more content coming for you in the coming weeks as we kind of lead up to the holiday season. Everything's cold, but that's a good thing for a channel like mine because I can keep you guys entertained and talking about racing when many of the racing voices take off for the winter. Not here. We're going to be talking about racing all the way up until the debut of racing the next season at the Rolex 24 or whatever. So thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube, and I will see you in the next video.